Maria Lopes had always been a woman of routine. Every evening, she would clock in at Sterling & Co., a sleek corporate office where the air smelled faintly of coffee and printer toner. For 5 years, she had worked as a janitor, quietly moving through the maze of cubicles and conference rooms after everyone else left for the day. Her job wasn't glamorous. Emptying trash bins, wiping down desks, mopping floors. But Maria took pride in her work. She liked knowing that when the employees arrived in the morning, everything would be spotless, ready for another busy day. On this particular Thursday, Maria was assigned to clean the executive wing, an area she rarely visited. The offices here were different from the rest of the building. They were larger, quieter, and carried an air of importance. Mr. Sterling's office, located at the end of the hallway, was especially intimidating. His massive oak desk dominated the room, surrounded by shelves lined with books and awards. Maria had cleaned it before, but never paid much attention to the details. Tonight, however, something caught her eye. As she dusted the bookshelf behind his desk, she noticed a slight gap between 2 rows of books. At first, she thought it was just a trick of the light, but upon closer inspection, she realized it wasn't random. It looked intentional. There was a faint outline of a rectangle etched into the wood paneling, barely visible unless you were standing close enough to touch it. Maria hesitated, her hand hovering over the spot. She knew curiosity could get her into trouble, but she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something important hidden behind that wall. Glancing around to make sure no one was watching, not that anyone ever stayed late on Thursdays, Maria reached for her cleaning tools. She grabbed a flathead screwdriver from her cart and gently pried at the edges of the panel. It didn't take long before the piece of wood popped loose, revealing a small hollow space inside. Maria's heart raced as she peered into the compartment. Inside was a dusty wooden box, its surface scratched and worn, as if it had been sitting there untouched for years. She opened the lid cautiously, half expecting to find nothing more than old papers or forgotten trinkets. But what she saw made her breath catch in her throat. The box contained a collection of items that seemed oddly personal: faded photographs, yellowed letters tied together with string, and a single USB drive resting at the bottom. One photograph stood out, a black and white image of Mr. Sterling standing beside someone whose face had been partially scratched out. Whoever they were, their presence clearly meant something significant. Maria felt a mix of emotions swirling inside her: curiosity, fear, and excitement all rolled into one. Who was the person in the picture? What secrets did these letters hold? And why had Mr. Sterling gone to such lengths to hide them? As she closed the box and slid it back into the compartment, Maria knew one thing for certain: this discovery was far bigger than she had anticipated. Whatever secrets lay hidden in that box, they weren't meant for her eyes. But now that she'd found them, she couldn't unsee them. Little did she know, this moment would set off a chain of events that would change not only her life, but the entire office forever. Maria couldn't sleep that night. The image of the hidden compartment and its mysterious contents kept replaying in her mind like a movie she couldn't turn off. She tossed and turned, her thoughts racing with questions. Who was the person in the scratched-out photograph? What secrets were buried in those handwritten letters? And what could possibly be on the USB drive? By morning, her curiosity had grown into something heavier, a mix of excitement and unease that weighed on her chest. The next day at work, Maria tried to act normal, but her mind was elsewhere. As she cleaned the usual spaces, she found herself glancing toward Mr. Sterling's office every few minutes. He wasn't there. He rarely came in before noon. Still, the thought of him discovering that she'd tampered with his private belongings made her stomach churn. She decided to keep the discovery to herself. For now. But keeping secrets wasn't easy, especially when they felt this big. During her lunch break, Maria sat alone in the break room, picking at her sandwich. That's when James, one of the IT technicians, walked in. He was friendly and always had a kind word for everyone, including Maria. Noticing her distracted expression, he asked if everything was okay. At first, Maria hesitated. Could she trust him? After a moment of silence, she decided to share, at least part of it. "I found something strange last night," she said quietly, leaning closer so no one else could hear. James raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What do you mean?" "In Mr. Sterling's office," Maria whispered. "There's a hidden compartment behind his bookshelf. I opened it, and there was a box inside. It had old photos, letters, and a USB drive." James's eyes widened. "Are you serious? Did you look at any of it?" "I glanced at the photo," Maria admitted. "It's him, Mr. Sterling, with someone else, but their face is scratched out. It's weird." James leaned back in his chair, clearly fascinated. "This sounds like something out of a movie. You think it's personal stuff, or maybe something worse?" Maria shrugged. "I don't know, but it feels important. Like, really important. Word travels fast in an office, even when people try to keep things quiet." By mid-afternoon, whispers about Maria's discovery had spread throughout the building. Employees huddled around water coolers and coffee machines, speculating wildly about what Mr. Sterling might be hiding. Some joked that he was secretly a spy or involved in some shady business deal. Others wondered if it was something more personal, perhaps evidence of a scandalous affair or a family secret gone wrong. No one knew for sure, but everyone wanted answers. By the end of the day, the atmosphere in the office had shifted. Normally bustling with routine conversations and keyboard clicks, the space now buzzed with tension. Even those who didn't usually pay attention to office gossip were drawn into the mystery. Maria noticed people looking at her differently, as if they suspected she knew more than she let on. She avoided eye contact, focusing instead on her cleaning tasks, but the weight of their stares followed her everywhere. Meanwhile, Mr. Sterling arrived late in the afternoon, oblivious to the storm brewing around him. As he strode past Maria without so much as a glance, she couldn't help but wonder how long it would take before he realized someone had uncovered his secrets. And when he did, what would happen next? Would he confront her? Would he try to cover it up? Or was there something even bigger lurking beneath the surface? For now, Maria kept her head down and her lips sealed. But deep down, she knew the truth wouldn't stay hidden forever. Whatever was inside that box, and on that USB drive, it was only a matter of time before it came to light. And when it did, nothing in the office, or in Maria's life, would ever be the same again. The office was buzzing the next morning, alive with a mix of excitement and unease. The discovery Maria had made in Mr. Sterling's office had become the centerpiece of every conversation. Employees who rarely spoke to each other were now huddled together in small groups, whispering theories like detectives piecing together clues. It didn't matter if they worked in accounting, marketing, or IT. Everyone wanted to know what secrets lay hidden behind that bookshelf. At the water cooler, Sarah from HR leaned in close to her coworker Mark. "What do you think is on that USB drive?" she asked, lowering her voice as though afraid someone might overhear. Mark shrugged but couldn't hide his grin. "Could be anything. Maybe it's proof of some illegal stuff, like money laundering or bribes. Or maybe it's something juicy, like secret love letters." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Love letters? Really? From Mr. Sterling?" "Hey, you never know," Mark replied with a shrug. "The guy's always been so uptight. Maybe he has a wild side we don't know about." Across the room, James, the IT technician Maria had confided in, was fielding questions from curious coworkers. Did Maria really find all that stuff? One of them asked, glancing toward the break room where Maria was refilling her mop bucket. James nodded vaguely, careful not to reveal too much. "She said there was a box with photos and letters. And yeah, a USB drive. But she didn't look at everything." "Do you think it's dangerous?" Another employee chimed in, wide-eyed. "Like, could it get us in trouble if anyone finds out?" James hesitated. He hadn't thought about it that way before. "I don't think so," he said finally. "But honestly, I have no idea what's on that thing. That's why everyone's so curious." As the day wore on, the speculation only grew wilder. Some employees joked that Mr. Sterling was secretly a spy, while others wondered if the USB drive contained evidence of corporate espionage. A few even suggested it might hold plans for layoffs or major restructuring, things that would directly affect their jobs. No theory seemed too far-fetched, and the more people talked, the more anxious the atmosphere became. Maria, meanwhile, tried her best to stay invisible. She moved quietly through the office, pretending not to notice the sideways glances and hushed conversations, but it was impossible to ignore the tension in the air. Every time someone passed her, she felt their eyes linger just a little longer than usual. Were they suspicious of her? Did they think she knew more than she'd admitted? By lunchtime, the gossip had reached a fever pitch. In the cafeteria, tables filled with animated discussions. One group speculated that the scratched-out face in the photograph belonged to a former business partner who had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Another insisted it was a family member, perhaps an estranged sibling or child. Someone even joked that it might be a celebrity, which earned a round of laughter but did little to ease the underlying tension. Even those who weren't actively spreading rumors couldn't resist eavesdropping. Rachel from payroll sat alone at her desk, pretending to focus on spreadsheets, but her ears perked up whenever she heard snippets of conversation nearby. "They say it's something big," one voice whispered. "Something that could ruin him." Rachel frowned. Ruin Mr. Sterling. The idea seemed absurd. He was the picture of professionalism, a man who exuded confidence and authority. How could someone like that have skeletons in his closet? Yet the more she thought about it, the more plausible it seemed. After all, nobody really knew much about his personal life outside of work. As the afternoon dragged on, the mood in the office shifted from curiosity to unease. People began to wonder how or if Mr. Sterling would address the situation. Would he deny the rumors outright, or would he try to sweep everything under the rug? The uncertainty hung over the office like a storm cloud, casting a shadow over even the simplest tasks. For Maria, the pressure was almost unbearable. She had started this chain reaction without meaning to, and now she felt caught in its wake. Every glance, every whisper, every speculative comment felt like a weight pressing down on her shoulders. She told herself to keep calm, to focus on her job, but deep down, she knew the truth couldn't stay hidden forever. Sooner or later, the contents of that box, and the secrets within, would come to light. And when they did, nothing would ever be the same again. The next day, Maria arrived at work with a knot in her stomach. She had spent most of the previous night replaying every detail of her discovery, wondering if she should have kept quiet. The office buzz was louder than ever, and she could feel the weight of everyone's suspicions pressing down on her. But what happened next caught her completely off guard. Just after lunch, as Maria was finishing up in the executive wing, Mr. Sterling himself appeared. He rarely came to this part of the building during cleaning hours, so his sudden presence made her heart skip a beat. His sharp suit and polished shoes seemed out of place against the hum of vacuum cleaners and the scent of disinfectant. He walked straight toward her, his expression unreadable but intense. "Maria," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Can I speak with you for a moment?" She froze, gripping the handle of her mop tightly. "Of course, Mr. Sterling," she replied, trying to sound casual despite the nerves bubbling inside her. He gestured for her to follow him into his office. Maria hesitated for a split second before stepping inside. The room felt smaller than usual, almost suffocating. Mr. Sterling closed the door behind them and turned to face her, his piercing gaze making it hard for her to meet his eyes. "I understand you were here late last night," he began, folding his arms across his chest. "Cleaning, I assume." "Yes, sir," Maria answered quickly. "Just doing my usual rounds." Mr. Sterling nodded slowly, though his expression didn't soften. "Did you happen to notice anything unusual while you were here? Anything out of the ordinary?" Maria's mind raced. Was he testing her? Did he already know about the hidden compartment? She swallowed hard, forcing herself to stay composed. No, sir. Everything looked normal to me. For a moment, Mr. Sterling studied her closely, as if searching for any sign of dishonesty. Then he sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. Listen, Maria, I'll be frank. There are sensitive items in this office that need to remain undisturbed. If anyone were to tamper with them, or even stumble upon them by accident, it could lead to complications. Do you understand what I'm saying? Maria nodded, her throat dry. Yes, sir. I wouldn't touch anything like that. Good, he said, though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. If you do come across something unusual in the future, please report it directly to me. No exceptions. With that, he dismissed her, opening the door and gesturing for her to leave. Maria hurried out of the office, her heart pounding. As soon as she was back in the hallway, she leaned against the wall, taking a deep breath. That had been close, too close. Word of the confrontation spread quickly. By the end of the day, nearly everyone in the office knew that Mr. Sterling had called Maria into his office. Speculation reached new heights, with some employees convinced she must have seen something incriminating. Others wondered if Mr. Sterling suspected foul play and was trying to intimidate her into silence. James found Maria in the supply closet later that afternoon, where she had retreated to collect herself. "Are you okay?" he asked, concern etched on his face. "What did he say to you?" Maria hesitated, unsure how much to share. Finally, she decided to tell him the truth, at least part of it. He asked if I'd noticed anything unusual in his office. I think he knows someone's been snooping around. James frowned. Do you think he suspects you? I don't know, Maria admitted. But he definitely wanted to make sure I didn't find anything, or at least that I wouldn't tell anyone if I did. James shook his head, clearly troubled. This is getting serious. If he's this jumpy, there's no telling what he might do next. Maria nodded, feeling the gravity of the situation settle over her. Up until now, the discovery had felt like a distant curiosity, something exciting yet detached from her everyday life. But Mr. Sterling's reaction had changed everything. This wasn't just gossip anymore. It was real, and it carried consequences. As the day came to a close, Maria couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Every glance from her coworkers felt heavier, more scrutinizing. Even Mr. Sterling seemed to linger in the corners of her mind, his warning echoing in her thoughts. For the first time, she questioned whether she had made the right choice in opening that hidden compartment. But deep down, she knew it was too late to turn back. Whatever secrets lay hidden in that box and on that USB drive, they weren't going to stay buried forever. And when they finally came to light, Maria feared that the fallout would reach far beyond the walls of Sterling & Co. That evening, after her shift ended, Maria sat alone in her small apartment, the wooden box resting on her kitchen table. The weight of the day's events pressed down on her, but she knew she couldn't ignore what she had found. Her curiosity, and a growing sense of responsibility, drove her to take the next step. She decided to look at the USB drive. Her hands trembled slightly as she plugged it into her old laptop. At first, nothing happened. Then, a folder appeared on the screen labeled Project Phoenix. Maria hesitated, her finger hovering over the mouse. What if this was something illegal? What if opening it put her in danger? But the thought of leaving it untouched felt worse. Taking a deep breath, she clicked on the folder. Inside were dozens of encrypted files, their names cryptic and unfamiliar. It took Maria nearly an hour of trial and error, using basic online guides, to crack one of them open. When she finally succeeded, her heart sank. The file contained detailed plans for a massive company merger, one that would consolidate Sterling & Co. with a larger corporation. On the surface, it seemed like standard business strategy, but as Maria scrolled through the documents, she realized the devastating truth. The merger would result in hundreds of layoffs. Names, departments, and severance packages were all listed in cold, clinical detail. Many of her coworkers, people she saw every day, were marked for termination. But that wasn't the worst part. Buried deeper in the files was something even more shocking. A video file. With trembling hands, Maria opened it. The footage showed Mr. Sterling sitting at his desk, speaking directly into the camera. His tone was calm but unsettling, as if he were confessing to a crime he didn't think anyone would ever discover. In the event that this recording is found, he began, "I want to make one thing clear. I had no choice. The decisions I've made were not mine alone. They were dictated by forces beyond my control." He went on to describe how he had manipulated financial reports, falsified earnings, and funneled money into offshore accounts to inflate the company's value before the merger. The goal, he explained, was to sell Sterling & Co. at an inflated price, enriching himself and a select group of executives while leaving employees and shareholders to bear the consequences. Maria stared at the screen, her mind reeling. This wasn't just unethical, it was illegal. And yet, here it was, documented in plain sight. She felt sick to her stomach, not just because of what she had uncovered, but because of the implications. If these plans came to fruition, lives would be ruined. Families would struggle. People who trusted Mr. Sterling would lose everything. She spent the rest of the night poring over the files, piecing together the full scope of the scheme. By morning, exhaustion weighed heavily on her, but her resolve had hardened. She couldn't let this go unchallenged. But how could she expose the truth without putting herself in harm's way? The next day at work, Maria approached James during his break. "I looked at the USB drive," she confessed quietly, pulling him aside where no one could overhear. "It's bad, James. Really bad." James frowned, concern etched across his face. "What do you mean?" "It's evidence of fraud," Maria whispered. "Mr. Sterling has been cooking the books, planning to sell the company, and firing hundreds of people. There's even a video of him admitting to it." James's eyes widened in disbelief. "Are you serious? That's insane." "I know," Maria said, her voice shaking. "But we can't just sit on this. We have to do something." James nodded slowly, processing the information. "You're right, but we can't handle this alone. If we go public, they'll come after us. We need to leak this anonymously, to HR, maybe the media. Someone who can protect us." Together, they devised a plan. Using James's technical expertise, they copied the files onto a new USB drive and encrypted them further to hide their origin. Then they drafted an anonymous email outlining the key points of the scandal and attached the files. Before sending it, they double-checked every detail, ensuring there was no trace leading back to them. When the email finally went out, Maria felt a mix of relief and dread. She had done the right thing, but the fallout would be enormous. As she returned to her cleaning duties, she couldn't help but wonder, would justice prevail, or would this only make things worse? The days following the anonymous email felt like an eternity for Maria. She went through her usual routine at work, mopping floors and emptying trash bins, but her mind was consumed with thoughts of what would happen next. Every time she passed Mr. Sterling's office, she braced herself, half expecting him to burst out and accuse her of betrayal. Yet, nothing seemed out of the ordinary, at least not at first. James tried to reassure her during their brief conversations in the break room. "We did the right thing," he said one morning, handing her a cup of coffee. "If anyone asks, we're clueless. Just keep your head down, and everything will work itself out." Maria nodded, though she wasn't entirely convinced. The weight of secrecy hung over her like a storm cloud, and she couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking a tightrope with no safety net below. What if someone traced the email back to them? What if Mr. Sterling found out it was her? Her fears weren't unfounded. Within 2 days, the entire office began to feel different, charged with tension and whispers. Employees who had been speculating about the hidden compartment now seemed unusually quiet, exchanging nervous glances instead of gossip. Something big was brewing, and everyone could sense it. Then came the meeting. Midway through the afternoon, an urgent announcement called all employees to the main conference room. Maria hesitated before joining the crowd, unsure whether she should attend or slip away unnoticed. In the end, curiosity got the better of her, and she took a seat near the back, trying to blend into the sea of faces. Mr. Sterling walked in moments later, flanked by two unfamiliar men in dark suits. His face was pale, his usual confidence replaced by something closer to panic. He cleared his throat and addressed the room, his voice strained. "I'm sure many of you have heard rumors circulating about certain allegations regarding this company." He paused, glancing around as if searching for allies. "Let me be clear. These claims are baseless and malicious. However, due to circumstances beyond my control, I am stepping aside temporarily while an internal investigation takes place." A murmur rippled through the room. Some employees exchanged shocked looks. Others sat frozen in disbelief. Maria's heart raced. She hadn't expected things to escalate so quickly. Had HR acted on the email? Or had someone else uncovered additional evidence? After the meeting, chaos erupted. Groups formed in hallways and break rooms, dissecting every word Mr. Sterling had said, or failed to say. For the first time, people stopped treating Maria like a background figure. Coworkers approached her cautiously, asking if she knew anything more about the situation. "You hear things when you clean, don't you?" one woman asked pointedly. Maria simply shook her head, feigning ignorance. Behind closed doors, however, James and Maria allowed themselves to breathe a little easier. It worked. James whispered during a quick hallway chat, "They're investigating him. This is huge." But Maria still worried. What if they find out it was us? We don't know how far this goes. If he's involved with powerful people, they might retaliate. James placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We covered our tracks. Even if they suspect someone leaked the info, they'll never connect it to us. Trust me." As the week wore on, news outlets picked up the story. Reporters camped outside the building, snapping photos and interviewing employees as they left for the day. Headlines screamed about corporate fraud, illegal financial dealings, and a potential cover-up involving top executives. Maria watched from afar, both amazed and terrified by the scale of the fallout. Despite the attention, life in the office became strangely subdued. Without Mr. Sterling's looming presence, the atmosphere shifted. Employees started treating each other differently, kinder, more openly. For years, they had operated under his rigid leadership, afraid to question authority. Now, cracks were forming in that facade, revealing a shared vulnerability and solidarity. For Maria, the change was especially profound. People who had barely acknowledged her before now greeted her warmly, thanking her for keeping the office running smoothly. Though none of them suspected her role in exposing the scandal, she felt a quiet pride knowing she had helped bring justice to light. Still, Maria knew the fight wasn't over. Investigations take time, and powerful people rarely go down without a fight. But for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to hope. Maybe, just maybe, this moment would mark the beginning of something better, not just for her, but for everyone at Sterling & Co. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity both inside and outside Sterling & Co. The investigation into Mr. Sterling's activities dominated headlines, with reporters digging deeper into his business dealings and uncovering even more shocking details. It turned out that Project Phoenix wasn't just about layoffs or inflated mergers. It was part of a much larger web of corruption involving multiple companies and high-profile executives. Names of influential figures began to surface, sending shockwaves through the corporate world. Inside the office, the mood remained tense but hopeful. Employees gathered around computer screens during breaks, reading updates on the scandal, as if it were a real-life drama unfolding before their eyes. Some felt vindicated, having long suspected that something unethical was happening behind closed doors. Others were angry at being lied to, at the thought of losing their jobs, and at the betrayal by someone they had trusted to lead them. For Maria, The days blurred together. She continued her work quietly, avoiding the spotlight despite the growing respect she noticed from her coworkers. People who once ignored her now smiled warmly and thanked her for her hard work. A few even invited her to join their lunch tables, something that had never happened before. Though she appreciated the kindness, Maria couldn't fully relax. She knew the truth about her role in exposing the scandal could come out at any moment, and she didn't want to risk ruining the fragile sense of unity that had begun to form among the staff. Meanwhile, James became an unexpected hero in the office. Without revealing his connection to Maria, he casually hinted that the anonymous tip might have come from someone within the company, a brave insider who cared enough to speak up. This sparked admiration among the employees, though no one could guess who the whistleblower might be. Some speculated it was his senior manager fed up with Mr. Sterling's tactics. Others thought it might be a tech-savvy worker like James himself. No one suspected Maria, which suited her just fine. As the investigation progressed, Mr. Sterling disappeared from the public eye. Rumors swirled about his whereabouts. He had allegedly fled the country to avoid questioning, but nothing was confirmed. Eventually, the board of directors issued a formal statement announcing his resignation and promising sweeping reforms to restore trust in the company. They also assured employees that layoffs would not proceed as planned, citing new leadership focused on transparency and ethical practices. Despite these promises, uncertainty lingered. Would the changes actually happen, or was this just damage control? Many employees worried about their futures, unsure whether the company could recover from such a scandal. Yet amid the chaos, small signs of hope emerged. Meetings became more collaborative, with managers actively seeking input from lower-level staff. Decisions that once seemed arbitrary now came with explanations. For the first time, people felt heard. Maria found herself reflecting on how much had changed, not just in the office, but within herself. Before discovering the hidden compartment, she had always seen herself as invisible, someone whose contributions went unnoticed. But now, she realized that even the quietest voices could make a difference. Her courage had sparked a chain reaction that exposed corruption and gave her coworkers a chance to fight for fairness. One afternoon, as she cleaned the executive wing, Maria paused outside Mr. Sterling's former office. Her room was empty now, stripped of its grandeur and awaiting a new occupant. She stared at the bookshelf where the hidden compartment had been, remembering the night she uncovered its secrets. It was strange to think how one small discovery had set off such a massive chain of events. Just then, Sarah from HR approached her. "Hey, Maria," she said with a smile. "I wanted to thank you for everything you do. We've all been so caught up in the drama lately, but we couldn't get through it without people like you holding things together." Maria smiled back, feeling the warmth spread through her chest. "Thank you," she replied softly. "That means a lot." As Sarah walked away, Maria returned to her cart, ready to finish her shift. She still didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, she felt optimistic. The office, and perhaps her own life, was beginning to change for the better. And though she would always carry the weight of what she had done, she knew it was a burden worth bearing. Months passed, and the dust began to settle at Sterling & Co. The scandal that had once dominated headlines gradually faded into the background, replaced by stories of other corporate misdeeds and political dramas. But within the walls of the office, life had changed in ways no one could have predicted. Where fear and silence once reigned, there was now a sense of openness, and even camaraderie that hadn't existed before. Maria's role in the company transformed in subtle but meaningful ways. One morning, as she arrived for her shift, she was called into a meeting with the interim CEO, a woman named Evelyn Carter, who had been brought in to steer the company toward recovery. Evelyn was different from Mr. Sterling. Calmer, more approachable, and genuinely interested in hearing feedback from employees at every level. "Maria," Evelyn began, gesturing for her to sit. "I've heard great things about your work ethic and dedication. You've been an integral part of this team for years, and I think it's time we recognize that." Maria blinked, unsure what to expect. "Thank you," she said hesitantly. "I just do my job." Evelyn smiled warmly. "Exactly. And that's why I'm promoting you to facilities supervisor. You'll oversee the cleaning staff, manage schedules, and help ensure our workspace remains a safe and welcoming environment for everyone." Maria's heart skipped a beat. A promotion. Her. For so long, she had felt invisible, like her contributions didn't matter. Now here was someone telling her, not just acknowledging her hard work, but trusting her with greater responsibility. She accepted the offer with gratitude, though it took days for the reality to sink in. In her new role, Maria found herself interacting with coworkers in ways she never had before. Instead of staying behind the scenes, she attended meetings, shared ideas, and became a familiar face to nearly everyone in the office. People continued to treat her with newfound respect, often seeking her advice on everything from scheduling conflicts to workplace morale. It was strange yet fulfilling to realize how much influence she now held. The changes extended beyond Maria. Under Evelyn's leadership, Sterling and Co. implemented policies designed to rebuild trust and foster transparency. Regular town hall meetings gave employees a platform to voice concerns, while anonymous suggestion boxes ensured no issue went unheard. Layoffs were officially off the table, replaced by initiatives aimed at improving efficiency without sacrificing jobs. Slowly but surely, the toxic culture Mr. Sterling had cultivated began to dissolve. For James, the aftermath of the scandal brought its own rewards. His role in helping Maria navigate the technical aspects of exposing the truth earned him recognition among his peers. He was promoted to head of its security, tasked with ensuring nothing like Project Phoenix ever happened again. Though he kept Maria's involvement secret, he often reminded her how proud he was of her bravery. Their friendship deepened, becoming a source of strength for both of them. As for Mr. Sterling, his name occasionally surfaced in news articles about ongoing investigations, but he remained largely absent from public view. Legal proceedings dragged on, with rumors suggesting hefty fines and potential jail time. While justice moved slowly, the employees of Sterling and Co. found closure in knowing they had played a part in holding him accountable. One evening, after finishing her first day as facilities supervisor, Maria stood by the window overlooking the city skyline. The office lights reflected off the glass, casting a warm glow over her face. She thought about how far she'd come, from being overlooked and underestimated to standing tall as someone whose actions had made a real difference. She also thought about the hidden compartment, the USB drive, and the secret she had uncovered. Though she sometimes wondered if she should reveal her role in exposing the scandal, she ultimately decided against it. The truth had come to light, and the company was better for it. That was enough. As she locked up the office and headed home, Maria felt a quiet pride swelling inside her. Life at Sterling and Co. wasn't perfect. It never would be. But it was moving in the right direction. And for the first time, she believed she belonged in that journey, not as a silent observer, but as a key player shaping the future. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Maria knew she was ready to face them. After all, she had already proven that even the quietest voices can spark the loudest change.